What if I told you that a quiet decision inside the palace may have shifted the balance of power in the British monarchy overnight? Not through a public announcement. Not through a royal decree. But through a private move that placed Prince William closer to the center of control than ever before. And it all happened just as a scandal surrounding Queen Camilla began spreading through the media like wildfire. But what really happened behind palace walls? For years, the British royal family appeared to move forward with quiet confidence. After the historic reign of Queen Elizabeth II, the crown passed to her eldest son, King Charles III. It was a moment the world had expected for decades. Ceremonies were grand. Traditions were followed perfectly. But behind the palace gates, the transition into a new royal era was far more complicated than it seemed. At the center of that new era stood Prince William. William had always been viewed differently from many other royals. From a young age, he grew up under intense public attention as the son of Princess Diana and the future king. Few people realized that William was only 15 when his mother died in 1997, an event that deeply shaped how he later approached royal life. The tragedy also transformed public sympathy toward him, creating a bond between William and the British public that still exists today. Over time, William's reputation grew stronger. Polls repeatedly showed that he was one of the most trusted members of the royal family. In fact, modern surveys often place him among the most popular royals in the United Kingdom. That level of public support carries enormous weight in a monarchy that depends heavily on public approval. But another key figure stood beside King Charles during this transition, his wife, Queen Camilla. Camilla's path into the royal family had never been simple. Her relationship with Charles had once sparked one of the most controversial chapters in royal history. During the 1990s, leaked recordings and media revelations about their relationship caused enormous public backlash. One of the most infamous moments came in 1993, when a secretly recorded phone call between Charles and Camilla was published by the press. The scandal became known worldwide and severely damaged Charles's public image at the time. Yet over the years, Camilla slowly rebuilt her reputation. By the time Charles became king, she had been officially crowned queen consort. It seemed that the long years of controversy were finally behind them. But inside the palace, the balance of influence among senior royals was quietly shifting. William had begun taking on more responsibility within the royal family. He represented the monarchy at major global events. He launched major initiatives like the Earthshot Environmental Prize. And many royal observers noticed something unusual. King Charles appeared to trust his son's judgment more and more with each passing year. At first, it seemed like a natural preparation for the future king. But then something unexpected happened. Rumors began spreading inside royal circles. Stories started appearing in the media. Questions were quietly whispered about tensions inside the palace. And suddenly, the calm that surrounded the royal family began to crack. Because what was about to unfold would not just test the reputation of one royal. It could change the balance of power inside the monarchy itself. And the storm was only just beginning. At first, the signs were easy to miss. The royal family has always lived under intense public attention, and small rumors appear in the press almost every week. But this time, the whispers felt different. They began quietly inside royal commentary circles and then slowly spread into mainstream headlines. At the center of the growing tension was Queen Camilla. For years, Camilla had worked carefully to rebuild her public image. After the painful years surrounding the breakdown of the marriage between King Charles III and Princess Diana, Camilla kept a much lower profile than many other senior royals. Palace advisors believed that quiet service and charitable work would slowly win over public trust. And in many ways, it worked. By the early 2020s, Camilla had taken on dozens of royal patronages. One of her most notable efforts was raising awareness about domestic violence and supporting victims through several charitable organizations. Many royal observers noted that this work helped improve her public reputation over time. But even with that progress, the past was never completely forgotten. A fascinating historical fact is that public acceptance of Camilla as queen was not guaranteed for many years. When Charles married Camilla in 2005, palace officials initially announced that she would eventually be known as Princess Consort, not Queen. That plan quietly changed later when Queen Elizabeth II publicly expressed her wish that Camilla should be recognized as Queen Consort when Charles became king. That moment was seen as a major turning point. Yet just as the royal family hoped to move forward under King Charles's reign, new tensions reportedly began surfacing behind palace doors. Royal insiders started hinting that differences were emerging about the future direction of the monarchy. Some commentators suggested that younger royals wanted a more modern approach, while traditional figures inside the palace preferred slower change. And standing right in the middle of this generational divide was Prince William. William had already begun shaping what many saw as the future image of the monarchy. His environmental initiative, the Earthshot Prize, launched in 2020, aimed to reward innovative solutions to climate change. Interestingly, the prize was inspired by the Moonshot Challenge announced by U.S. President John F. Kennedy in 1962. That kind of global leadership made William increasingly influential. But influence inside the royal family is rarely simple. Because the monarchy is not just a national institution, it is also a family. And like any family, disagreements about the future can create quiet tension. Some reports began suggesting that King Charles was gradually allowing William to take on more decision-making responsibilities behind the scenes. While such transitions are common in royal history, the timing caught the attention of commentators, especially as media speculation surrounding Camilla started intensifying. One little-known fact is that heirs to the British throne often begin attending confidential government briefings years before they become monarch. These meetings help prepare them for future responsibilities. Prince Charles himself attended such briefings long before becoming king. If William was now stepping deeper into that inner circle of influence, it could signal something important. Perhaps this wasn't simply preparation for the distant future. Perhaps it was preparation for a challenge unfolding right now. Because as rumors grew louder and journalists began digging deeper, the story started moving faster than the palace could control. And the question everyone began asking was simple, but explosive. What exactly had happened inside the royal household that forced King Charles to rely so heavily on his eldest son? The answer, it seemed, was about to ignite a media storm no one inside the palace could fully stop. Once the first hints of controversy reached the press, the reaction was immediate. The British royal family has always been one of the most closely watched institutions in the world. Newspapers, television networks, and now millions of social media users follow every royal development. When whispers of tension connected to Queen Camilla began circulating, journalists quickly started searching for answers. And when the media starts digging into royal affairs, history shows that stories rarely stay small. One fascinating fact is that the relationship between the British monarchy and the press has always been complicated. In the early 20th century, journalists often avoided reporting royal scandals out of respect for the crown. But that tradition began changing dramatically during the 1980s and 1990s, especially during the turbulent years surrounding Princess Diana. The modern era of aggressive royal coverage had begun. And once again, the spotlight was turning toward Buckingham Palace. Headlines began appearing that hinted at internal disagreements inside the royal household. Some royal commentators suggested that tensions might exist over influence, public messaging, or even the direction of the monarchy itself. While many of these reports were based on anonymous sources and speculation, the discussion alone was enough to spark intense curiosity. Because whenever the royal family appears divided, the public immediately wants to know why. The press began analyzing every royal appearance, every public speech, every moment when members of the royal family appeared together or apart. Even small details were examined for clues about what might be happening behind the scenes. A little-known fact is that the royal household employs professional press secretaries whose job is to manage the monarchy's relationship with the media. This system became far more sophisticated after the difficult press battles of the 1990s. Today, entire communications teams work behind the scenes to shape how royal stories are presented to the public. But even the best PR strategies cannot fully control modern media. Social platforms allow rumors to spread faster than official statements. A single anonymous report can travel across the world in minutes. And once speculation begins, it often grows far beyond the original story. That is exactly what happened as the discussion around Camilla intensified. At the same time, attention began shifting toward Prince William. Journalists noticed that William was appearing more frequently in major royal roles and international events. His environmental initiative, the Earthshot Prize, continued to gain global attention. His public appearances with Catherine, Princess of Wales, projected stability and modern leadership. To many observers, the contrast was striking. One part of the royal narrative seemed increasingly focused on controversy, while another focused on the future. And that contrast fueled even more speculation. Some analysts began suggesting that King Charles III might be quietly preparing the monarchy for a generational shift in influence. While no official announcement supported this idea, the timing raised questions. Because historically, moments of royal scandal often accelerate changes within the monarchy. For example, after the abdication crisis of 1936, the royal family dramatically reshaped its public image around duty and service. That transformation helped restore public trust in the crown. Now commentators wondered if something similar might be happening again. But the real story, the conversations that mattered most, were not happening in newspaper offices or television studios. They were happening inside the palace, behind closed doors. In private meetings where senior royals and advisors debated how to respond to a situation that was quickly spiraling beyond their control. Because while the media speculated wildly outside the palace gates, those inside knew something the public did not. The controversy surrounding Camilla was only part of the story. And the decision King Charles was preparing to make could change the power structure of the monarchy itself. But the world had not yet seen the most dramatic chapter of this royal drama. Because inside the royal family, emotions were about to collide with tradition. And the consequences could be far greater than anyone expected. Behind the grand walls of palaces and castles, the British monarchy functions in two very different worlds. One is public. It is filled with ceremonies, smiles, speeches, and carefully planned appearances. The other world is private. And in that world, the royal family faces the same emotional tensions that exist in any powerful family business. When controversy begins circling the crown, that private world becomes intense. Inside the palace, senior members of the royal household reportedly began holding quiet meetings to discuss the growing situation surrounding Queen Camilla. While the public only saw carefully controlled statements and appearances, royal advisors were trying to manage something far more complicated behind the scenes. One important fact many people don't realize is that the British royal household is not just a family, it is also a large organization. Hundreds of staff members work across multiple royal residences. These include advisors, private secretaries, legal experts, and communication teams. Their job is to protect the stability of the monarchy. And stability was now becoming a concern. At the center of the discussions was King Charles III. After waiting more than 70 years to become monarch, Charles understood better than anyone how fragile public support for the royal family could be. His own life had been shaped by intense media scrutiny, especially during the difficult years of his marriage to Princess Diana. In fact, historians often point out that the 1990s were one of the most turbulent decades the modern monarchy had ever experienced. During that time, multiple royal marriages collapsed, scandals filled newspapers, and public approval of the monarchy dropped significantly. Those memories still influence how royal crises are handled today. Because once trust begins to weaken, rebuilding it can take years. Another important figure in these discussions was Prince William. Over the past decade, William had gradually become one of the most respected voices inside the royal family. Advisors often describe him as cautious, strategic, and deeply aware of how public opinion can shape the monarchy's survival. A fascinating detail about William's upbringing reveals why this might be true. After the death of Princess Diana, both William and his brother were given a more modern education about public life than previous royal heirs. They were encouraged to understand media influence, charity work, and global issues. That perspective shaped William's approach to leadership. As discussions continued behind palace doors, some royal commentators suggested that Charles may have increasingly turned to his son for guidance. While the exact details of those conversations remain private, historians know that monarchs often rely heavily on their heirs during difficult moments. For example, in the later years of her reign, Queen Elizabeth II quietly allowed Charles to take on more responsibilities in representing the crown internationally. This gradual shift helped prepare the monarchy for the future transition. Something similar might now have been happening again. But transitions of influence are never simple inside royal families. Because every change in leadership can create uncertainty about roles, authority, and public image. And while William represented the future of the monarchy, Camilla represented a different chapter in its story, one that had taken decades to stabilize. That delicate balance between past and future made the situation far more complicated. Royal advisors reportedly debated how to maintain unity while also protecting the monarchy's long-term reputation. Decisions about public appearances, messaging, and responsibilities had to be considered carefully. One wrong move could make the controversy worse. One surprising fact about royal crisis management is that the palace sometimes delays responding to media stories on purpose. Communication experts believe that ignoring certain rumors can allow them to fade away faster than directly confronting them. But this time, silence alone might not have been enough. Because as the discussions inside the palace grew more serious, one question began to dominate the conversation. Should Prince William take on a stronger leadership role sooner than expected? If the answer was yes, it would signal a quiet but powerful shift in how the monarchy was preparing for the future. And if that shift was already happening, it meant the royal family was responding to something far more serious than the public realized. But even as those private debates unfolded, another challenge was approaching. Because royal controversies rarely remain confined to family discussions. Eventually, they reach a point where lawyers, legal advisors, and political leaders begin to take notice. And once that happens, the situation can escalate very quickly. The royal family was about to enter the most dangerous stage of the crisis. And the next chapter would determine whether the monarchy could contain the storm, or whether it would grow even larger. Once whispers and rumors inside the palace reached the public, the situation quickly moved from a private family dispute to a matter with legal implications. The British monarchy operates under centuries of laws, traditions, and unique privileges, but even these protections have limits when public scrutiny reaches a tipping point. And as attention around Queen Camilla intensified, so did the potential for legal complications. One surprising fact most people don't know is that members of the royal family are not completely immune from civil law. While the sovereign is technically above certain legal proceedings, other royals may face lawsuits or investigations related to property, finances, or official duties. This has happened several times in history, often quietly behind closed doors to avoid public scandal. For example, in 1977, legal challenges were quietly filed regarding the royal estates of Queen Elizabeth II, prompting internal reviews of royal property law that were never publicly reported until decades later. These cases revealed how even centuries-old legal privileges could face modern scrutiny. And in today's world of global media and social platforms, every detail, even small disagreements, can be magnified into public controversy. In the case of Camilla, some reports suggested that her growing involvement in high-profile events, combined with whispers of palace tension, created both political and legal questions. If certain responsibilities were being shifted to Prince William ahead of schedule, this raised constitutional questions. Technically, the king has authority to delegate duties, but the public perception of a royal power struggle could lead to parliamentary inquiries or legal commentary about whether royal traditions were being respected. Prince William, meanwhile, was increasingly stepping into roles that had been traditionally reserved for the reigning monarch. He represented the crown at international summits, ceremonial events, and charity launches. One lesser-known fact is that even minor changes to the allocation of royal duties often require coordination with government officials in the UK. For example, shifts in military patronages or overseas visits need to be formally approved to maintain constitutional propriety. Any perception of overstepping could have been interpreted as controversial, even if entirely legal. The palace's legal advisors reportedly began evaluating the consequences of this shift. Could media speculation about Camilla undermine her authority or the monarchy's reputation? Could critics argue that William was being fast-tracked unfairly, or that Camilla was being sidelined? Legal precedents were pulled from centuries of royal history to determine the safest path forward. For instance, in 1910, Edward VII faced legal scrutiny over royal property disputes, and lessons from that case were still cited in royal legal briefings decades later. Public backlash was also a serious concern. While royals enjoy certain legal protections, public opinion can act as a form of social pressure law. A scandal perceived as mismanagement or nepotism can spark parliamentary discussions, media campaigns, and even debates in the House of Commons. Advisors understood that if public sentiment turned negative, legal scrutiny might follow indirectly, simply because the monarchy depends on trust to function effectively. This stage of the crisis also revealed an internal truth. Even the most powerful family can be vulnerable. While the monarchy possesses centuries of privilege, modern expectations of transparency, equality, and fairness mean that shifts in power, even private ones, are subject to both legal and societal judgment. At the same time, William's growing role seemed increasingly necessary. The palace reportedly believed that empowering the next generation could stabilize public confidence. But the decision to do so, while legally sound, risked fueling rumors and amplifying media attention. And so, the royal family faced a choice: act decisively to protect the monarchy's future or risk letting internal tensions spiral further. Because once legal and public pressure converge, even centuries of royal tradition may not be enough to contain the fallout. And the world had not yet seen the full consequences of the decisions made behind those palace doors. What would happen next? Could the monarchy survive this perfect storm, or was the royal family about to face a crisis unlike any in living memory? The moment the legal and media pressures collided, the royal family felt the weight of decades of scrutiny pressed down all at once. What had started as quiet speculation about Queen Camilla and Prince William's rising influence quickly spiraled into a full-blown public debate. Newspapers, television channels, and social media exploded with commentary, and the monarchy faced questions it hadn't encountered in years. Public sentiment, as always, proved to be a double-edged sword. While many admired William's calm, steady leadership, others questioned why Camilla seemed sidelined, despite her official title as Queen Consort. A lesser-known historical detail is that previous Queen Consorts, such as Queen Mary in the early 20th century, often faced similar scrutiny, balancing ceremonial duties with public expectation. But unlike Mary, Camilla had modern media platforms amplifying every misstep or perceived slight. Internally, the palace reportedly experienced heightened tension. Advisors struggled to maintain unity, while private conversations between Charles, William, and Camilla grew more urgent. One insider revealed that Charles had begun delegating sensitive decisions to William, including oversight of key royal events and charitable initiatives. It was a careful strategy. The younger prince's popularity could act as a buffer against public disapproval. Yet at the same time, Camilla's role was being quietly reshaped behind closed doors. One shocking detail many overlooked is that in 1952, Queen Elizabeth II herself experienced a crisis of public confidence early in her reign. She faced criticism for both personal and political matters, including perceived favoritism and the handling of her father's estate. That historical precedent shows that even monarchs with centuries of tradition behind them can face sudden challenges to legitimacy. Charles and Camilla were now navigating a similar, albeit modern, landscape. The fallout was not limited to perception, it had tangible consequences. Some royal charities were pressured to clarify leadership roles. International engagements required careful coordination, as global observers were paying close attention to the apparent shift in influence from Camilla to William. And palace staff, while highly trained, admitted that this level of media scrutiny made every decision fraught with risk. Meanwhile, William himself had to walk a delicate line. His public image, carefully cultivated over decades, depended on maintaining both authority and empathy. Reports surfaced that he began private consultations with senior advisors, ensuring that any actions taken would minimize backlash. He reportedly even engaged with parliament officials informally, something heirs to the throne have done historically, though rarely publicly acknowledged. This small but important detail shows how proactive William was in controlling the narrative and preparing for the monarchy's future. Public opinion polls during this period reflected the tension. While William's approval ratings surged, Camilla's showed signs of strain. Yet many analysts argued that the Queen Consort's reputation could stabilize if the crisis was managed carefully, a process reminiscent of Queen Victoria's early years, when public perception shifted dramatically after periods of personal scandal. History repeatedly demonstrates that the monarchy can endure turbulence if it adapts strategically. Another fascinating fact is that the palace often relies on a coordinated, narrative strategy during crises. In previous decades, this approach was used after scandals involving Princess Diana and Prince Andrew, blending careful messaging, public appearances, and media engagement. Applying similar tactics in the current situation helped prevent what could have been an uncontrollable public backlash. Even with these measures, the emotional toll inside the family was significant. Reports indicated that private disagreements and subtle power struggles persisted behind the palace walls. While the monarchy projected stability outwardly, the internal dynamics were far more complicated, reflecting centuries of inherited protocol, personal ambition, and public expectation. And yet, the crisis also created an opportunity. William's leadership, now more visible than ever, positioned him as the central figure in the monarchy's future. By assuming responsibilities once solely in the king's hands, He became the stabilizing force both inside the palace and in the eyes of the public. But the question remained, could this careful balancing act last? Could the monarchy survive both the public scrutiny and the quiet tensions within? Because as much as the family tried to contain the fallout, one thing was certain: the decisions made during this period would echo for decades, shaping the royal family's image and power structure in ways no one could yet fully predict. And as whispers of Camilla's role continued, a final reckoning loomed on the horizon, one that would force the monarchy to confront the consequences of both past scandals and present choices. After months of speculation and behind-the-scenes debates, the royal family reached a turning point. Prince William was quietly given full control over key royal duties, including charities, international events, and public engagements. King Charles III's decision wasn't due to incapacity, it was a strategic move to secure the monarchy's future. Queen Camilla retained her title but stepped back to focus on ceremonial and charitable roles, a change that stirred mixed feelings inside the palace. The media immediately called it a generational shift, while royal PR teams carefully managed the story to prevent public backlash. William's rise mirrors history. In 1936, King Edward VIII's abdication forced the monarchy to reorganize power and stabilize the crown. Public opinion largely favored William's leadership, while Camilla's cautious visibility was accepted, though critics debated her sidelining. The monarchy survived the storm but had changed forever. The question now: will this shift strengthen the crown or signal a slow transformation? Could Charles have handled this differently? Should royals be held accountable like public figures? Is the monarchy as we know it ending? Hit subscribe for more untold royal stories.